Okay, welcome back to the Ecosystem Podcast. We are doing something new today. We have a guest on the show. In fact, we have 3 guests. They're on the wall behind Anna. I'm sure they were created by ChatGPT. I take it's a family photo. Is that an AI-generated family photo?
It is. It's an AI-generated family photo. Because,
Nice.
if we take, it's not even a real photo, but it could be,
Yeah.
You just take 3 ordinary people apart from our child, who does look exactly like that, I kid you not. And they just, AI just makes you prettier, happier, younger.
Think of the poor photographer that just lost that job because of AI.
No, we've paid proper photographers too.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome.
We've had a baby and a wedding in the last 2 years. We are keeping the photography business in. We're still keeping photographers in business.
Floating.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Nice. Andrew, why don't you introduce our real guest of the show, James, and tell us why we're here and what big world challenge are we going to solve in the next 30 minutes?
Yeah, so we wanted to do something, as Mark said, new today, and we're going to, I think, do more of this. Start to have guests, people whose thoughts we respect and who we think are at least somewhat interesting on the show. I've known James for a long time. James has served hard time in that he was once my direct manager, and the fact that we're still friends after that is probably a good sign. James is the managing director of the commercial business group at a Microsoft partner called Applied Information Sciences, AIS. They are a bunch of very, very bright people who are doing some really interesting work and have been for a long time around cloud adoption and artificial intelligence. And on the heels of Mark and my conversation in the last episode about trends that we're seeing across the global economy in terms of CapEx and OpEx and investment curves for AI, we thought we'd have James join so we could talk a little bit about and take on the topic of the why, right? If organizations are going to be investing the kind of money and the kind of effort and the kind of human capital in this modernization that many are starting to take on, they should really be asking themselves hard questions about why they're doing it and what they hope to achieve. So with that, James, welcome to the podcast. And my first question for you is: can you tell us that little story that you shared from the last couple of weeks about a conversation you had on this topic?
Sure. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me onto the show. Andrew and I, as Andrew said, have known each other for many years, and we share a passion for creating the vision and the strategy for organizations to move forward with their investments. This really started around cloud in general, and then progressed to low code, and now, of course, AI is such a hot topic for everybody. And I see, repeating kind of stories or repeating challenges that our clients face when we get engaged with them. The example that Andrew was mentioning recently was, another client who is eager to adopt the cloud, is eager to work in the cloud and set up the foundations and the governance and security and scalability. But when I met with them first and started to ask things like, what is the benefit here? What is the mission? What is the outcomes you're looking for? They really struggled again with trying to answer that question. And I feel like often organizations follow the latest trends, or perhaps their C-suite have said, hey, you need to do this thing because everybody else is doing it. And then they jump in and they get busy trying to implement. So in this case, the response from the client stakeholders that I talked to was that, well, we're doing stuff in the cloud already. So we thought it's probably a good idea to shore up our security and governance posture and, make sure that the stuff that's in there is ready and can be used by the organization, but without any real strategy or motivation behind it. There was no top-down executive mandate in this case, and there was no desire or motivation from the business to actually use cloud services. Yet this group felt it was important for them to invest, a non-insignificant amount of money to build a cloud platform, and it's almost like if we build it, they will come, without building it in parallel with the rest of the business. So Andrew and I have had this passion for many years of building a roadmap and a strategy for organizations that's not the high level business strategy that organizations typically will receive from some of the partners that they work with, but one that kind of bridges the gap between that business outcome and the business value that can be achieved through leveraging these services, and then the implementable plan, that the actionable plan that they can take. Because I feel like that's another challenge that these organizations face. They really struggle with, how do I execute on this plan, and what are all the steps to connect the dots to achieve those outcomes?
It's interesting because, straight away what jumps to mind is how many licenses can they buy for that? Right? Like most partners are like, so how many people you got? Like, do you need X? And it's like straight into, what Microsoft product are we going to sell you? Obviously, that model that you're going through is quite a different conversation at a different level in the organization. I assume that's just not happening in the IT department.
The problem, I believe, with cloud in particular is that cloud as an infrastructure environment or replacement for traditional data centers lives traditionally in an IT infrastructure organization. So when the C-suite says, "Hey, go make cloud happen," they go to their infrastructure group initially, and a lot of work happens there. But nobody recognizes that cloud is something that should be addressed and considered across the entire organization. And so you need to have product owners and business owners and software development teams and leadership across the entire organization in the same conversation at the same time, so everybody can be kind of tracking against the same goals and outcomes. And often we see, particularly in larger organizations that we work with, such a siloed structure that they really then struggle with how to actually collaborate together, because they've been built on the success of strong individual silos and things being kind of thrown across the fence to each other, rather than having to truly work as a team to achieve these outcomes together.
Do you see some of these silos creating multiple littler silos within the big silo?
Oh, without a doubt. And in some cases, as you can imagine, there's
We're
a lot
gonna
of
build our
political,
own tenant.
there's a lot of political challenges at times, and conflicts and politics. We say, in many cases, IT or public cloud infrastructure may have started with AWS in an organization, and there's a maybe robust team or structure for that. But then other groups want to use Azure services, and the other side of the organization says, no, we're good. We've got our public cloud infrastructure already set up. We use AWS. And then the M365 team decides, well, it's Microsoft Cloud. We'll just stand up an Azure environment and we'll do our own thing over here, and then we'll call it the Microsoft Cloud. And then they gain, a few steps forward, and then suddenly conflict arises. The question about, hey, why are you doing cloud over here? Because we do cloud over there, and usually chaos ensues at that point also.
This is that phenomenon that I've called the IT Tower of Babel before, right? Where if you think back to the story that all these folks in the tower, they all spoke different languages, right? And they couldn't communicate with one another. I think it's a biblical story, but in any case, I'm working with an organization that they are investing heavily in their building a data platform, like a proper data platform, and applause to that, right? It's one of all the organizations I've talked to about this, that this one is maybe taking it the most seriously. So it's great that they're doing this. But I've introduced them to this notion, right, that we can't just build a downstream data platform in isolation of any sort of knowledge or joined up thinking about what you're doing with data collection or with your core business systems or your application portfolio, or that kind of integration layer in the center, data and application integration, master data management. And it's just, so it's not surprising anymore, right? But I see so many of these organizations that are just still doing these things separately.
So our philosophy has always been to drive innovation. We're an organization, my company, of curious technical individuals who are always trying to enable technology. But really, that innovation has to bring business value, it has to be aligned to the outcomes and the business value that can be created. Everything else from that is really downstream or in support or the foundations of that success. And really, that strategy should be built on the business objectives or the business outcomes that can be achieved. And then from there, all of the things underlying that need to be put in place. But I think it often starts, particularly in cloud, in a different direction. It starts at the bottom level of, okay, let's establish your cloud foundations, and then we'll figure out somewhere along the way how that might be used in support of the business.
How do you make sure you get high enough in the stack inside an account to have these conversations? I'll give you an example. Yesterday, I was talking in something with a seller in my organization that works with a very large global account that is in the mining sector. And the issue they have is that their relationships are not high enough in the executive decision tree. So therefore, when in this case it was a discussion around the Power Platform, everything was a tactical play. It wasn't a strategic play in the organization. And, Microsoft had sold a bazillion licenses in there 3 years on. Not many have been used, right? And so,
shocked by that.
Yeah, so they went on this whole thing like, yes, this is going to be the thing that solves world peace inside the organization. 3 years on, I know the question is about to come up, probably driven by the CFO. What's this line item here that we're paying so much money for? And nobody inside the organization can articulate why it's a good idea. The people that originally put it on, right? Over 3 years, people move jobs. So even the person's going to dodge the bullet that made the purchase. How do you take from here's our relationship at this level, which is generally the person that's been assigned to run it, right? They got no authority whatsoever.
The platform owner.
Yeah, the platform owner who is like, it's one of their 50 other things on their plate, right? So it's not a big deal. How do you, with a customer, make sure you're playing at the right level of game, that you're either going up to either the CTO, the CIO, the CDO, ultimately they'll all report into the CFO and the CFO into the CEO. So how do you make sure that you're getting at that level of game to have these conversations? Because they're no good having it too far down the decision, the silo, if you like, of who can make these kind of decisions.
It's a great question. There's a few parts, I guess, to my answer. As a company that is, for profit, trying to do business with clients who are trying to enable the use of these technologies, we of course are eager to start working with these vendors, right? To start getting paid and so forth. But through the course of many years of doing this, we realized that jumping in quickly doesn't provide a good outcome for either the vendor or for us, because there's too much confusion and uncertainty about what the value is. I like to tell stories quite a bit with my clients. To tell them the stories, kind of highlighting the risk of, they're rushing to put a piece of this in place without thinking enough holistically. Not thinking holistically that they're going to spin their wheels for 12 months, which some clients do, just analyzing to death the thing that they're trying to figure out, but incrementally moving things forward. I think we've very much embraced an agile philosophy going back 20 years of software development, and that idea of incremental benefit as well, helping move forward in these measurable kind of bite-sized chunks, can help. But then still ultimately going back to telling the story of, if we all come, if we raise this up to the level that affects the entire organization, then we can start to make sure that the outcomes can be achieved. And like I said, telling stories of situations where clients that we interacted with in the past did not embrace that idea, did not believe in its importance, and felt like, again, going back to maybe turf wars and politics, they have the ownership and responsibility of this. They don't want to bring in others because they don't want others to influence perhaps their authority or their ownership over executing on this, and not, again, seeing the big picture. The other thing I'll say, because you brought up the example about Power Platform, that has its own unique issues, because where does Power Platform live in an organization? At least, Azure public cloud infrastructure lives true. Well, at least at an infrastructure level, it lives in, IT infrastructure. Power Platform really struggles because it doesn't have a natural home. It doesn't really live in the business. It doesn't quite live in, I don't know, an enterprise architecture organization. And typically, organizations I've seen try to have it live in the infrastructure team, but they don't enable the use of Power Platform. There isn't really much infrastructure to manage. There's governance and there's license management and, information rights management, but they're not the enablers of the use of that technology, because that's not their job, right? They just maintain infrastructure and make it secure and so forth. So that has its own unique issues that Andrew and I have definitely dealt with in the past.
Chris and Will are going to be sad they missed that opportunity.
Right,
to
they're really
pounce.
interested in that subject. Do you see, taking Mark's example here, a panic moment when a bunch of people are seeing that line item and for their sins that they did not leave the organization yet, and it's a bad time to go right now. So, oh my God, I've got to learn, where the Power Platform infrastructure code, whatever's happening, where does this live? Do you see maybe these people trying to get, partners to help them? And then how do you convince them to spend even more money? Because obviously the CFO is like, gotta get rid of this. How do we go and say, wait, this is a good thing. We can put controls in place. There's tooling. Even if there are silos and, other departments are working with AWS, we can play with that as well. Wait, don't rush. We can help here. How do we do that? And how do we make sure again that we're talking to the right person?
I've had a lot of conversations, even in the past 12 months, with leadership at Microsoft in different verticals. And the frustration that they're feeling, and actually this is, I think, is a good segue into a similar challenge and an opportunity with Azure OpenAI. But these organizations are not typically going to commit to an enterprise-wide commitment of licenses for Power Platform. They want to learn the value. They want to experiment. They want to buy, a few hundred licenses and see the benefit of that. And then they want to measure that impact and value. And then they are typically willing to do more, versus, I think the Microsoft approach or other partner approach of selling this deal across the entire organization. We just haven't seen that be successful, or that is definitely a tough path of a lot of engagement with the client to show them all those benefits over a long period of time anyway, before maybe that commitment is made. Our approach is typically, let's start showing the value. Let's start to prove the outcomes. We've run hackathons with clients where they can really quickly see that benefit being generated. Bring in immediate business frustrations or use cases into a hackathon, and within a couple of days build out lots of solutions. They're not fully production ready, but you can then take that back to the C-suite and you can measure the return on investment to this issue. You take the frustration, the inefficiency, the automation that could be in place, and you start to measure that out across all of the end users of that process and all the time savings. Typically, right, the efficiency is brought often through time saving, and it's pretty easy to calculate then across the end user base what that could look like. And then, people like CFOs start to pay attention to that, and then you can start to change their mind. But then the ongoing enablement, right, the education around, a platform like Power Platform, the enablement is key, because I think the idea of it being a citizen developer platform was a little misleading. It is absolutely a platform that can be used quickly by folks without the complexity of pro development, but there's still standards and best practices. And last thing I'll say here is that I used to be an engineer, C++ and C# back in the day. I don't touch a keyboard anymore, but about a year and a half ago, I wanted to build some quick applications. And I thought, well, I'm going to use this opportunity to just get in there and knock out a couple of power apps, and it'll be quick. And it really took me a while to understand a different mindset of how to develop in Power Platform and build Power Apps. So it's important to recognize that enablement has to be put in place at the organizational level for a platform investment like that to be fully benefit the organization.
Saying that that it was citizen developer was I forget the term you used, but it was very generous. The term you used, because I think the concept of citizen development has probably caused more damage to where the Power Platform could have gone than what it has done, because I see it relegated to that's for everything that we can't handle under an enterprise solution. And I just think it's a total misalignment that we are now having to correct 6 years on with big enterprise customers.
But it depends on the citizen developer, because, for example, and I'll just say this quick thing. Sorry, Andrew, I've been interrupting you for a bit now, like in real life.
They can edit this face onto the screen now. There we go.
I had an interview today, with someone, and she said that, oh, I don't do pro code, I'm a citizen developer, really. And then I dig a bit deeper and uncover the fact that she's done all of the Power Platform exams plus the Office 365, because she was like, something connects into there, so I had to sort of, learn about that. And then she knew Azure and governance, and from governance she went to Purview, and then she's like, oh, but that's all citizen developer. I'm like, gosh, I wish all citizen developers thought like you, It's like, okay, you're not technical, fine.
Yeah.
Anna, that's really interesting, and when we might have to come back to the why and to the motivation that we started this episode with on the next episode. But I'm going to keep running with that. One of the things that I've noticed lately is in a few of the talking with a few groups of conference organizers for these Microsoft conferences, where I've put in, and Anna and I present together very frequently. So we put in proposals to present a session at these conferences. And, our whole theme, right, is where cloud infrastructure meets app dev, meets low code, meets the data platform, and that data is used by AI. And, oh, by the way, that means we have to govern and secure that data. So have you met Purview? We've been getting responses back from some of these conference organizers, right, that basically, oh, well, you need to take all the non-Power Platform stuff out of the session because the Power Platform people wouldn't really be interested in Purview or data platform. I was actually recently asked quite literally to take all references to SQL out of a session proposal about the data platform, right?
And it was hard. We went through like 3 iterations or something like that. It was not like, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But these sessions that we do, when we actually are there presenting, the rooms are packed. I mean, we've done multiple of these sessions ostensibly for an audience in one area of the cloud, where we've been talking about, okay, how can you pull together other cloud technologies into your world? I almost said into your purview, but that's not what I meant. And it's been standing room only in these sessions. So I can't tell right now if there's a real hunger that people have to kind of cross technology boundaries, or if there's a real hesitation that people have. It's unclear to me. I'd love to know what you guys are seeing.
I try to reframe the whole conversation to delivering innovation, and not talking about the technology, but there's different paths to achieving innovation. Low code development is absolutely a path that makes sense to incorporate into the overall kind of vision. And there are other, technologies that can be considered, but trying to avoid it being a technology first conversation, or about maybe talking about the methods of how you can achieve innovation. it's interesting because I started as a application developer. I joined AIS, my company now, as a senior software engineer. And I remember being assigned to learn SharePoint back then. SharePoint 2007, I think, had come out, and there was a lot of conflict. I didn't really care. I was happy to learn it, but there was a lot of conflict around the pro developers who were like, no, we do the hardcore stuff. Like, we're not going to touch that. That's not real development. I embraced it because I was just curious about it. And I feel like when Power Platform came along, it was not dissimilar, right? That's not real development. But we've seen a shift along the way where, and my personal, I guess, shift from being passionate about doing development to, taking a step back and focusing more on clients and client engagements and client problems that we could solve, was realizing that over the course of many, many years, I was just using different technology to solve the same problems. And the actual development work itself was kind of like this repeating cycle of, I've done that before and I use this different technology. Now there's another one that's solving the same thing. And I realized that ultimately the goal is not to build the coolest software in the world. It's to solve the problems that we're trying to solve for our clients.
So true.
I have conversations I do this whole sort of workshop with senior leaders, decision makers, execs, and the whole goal, right, is to help leaders of these organizations build an executive vision for where they're trying to take the cloud or where they're trying to take some subset thereof. I actually hate the subset business. I hate when it's, oh, we're building a power platform strategy or an AI strategy or a data platform strategy. I much prefer we're building a cloud strategy because all these pieces are connected. But one of the things that comes out of that, what I call guiding principles, right? So, we talk a lot. It's very free form about what's keeping you up at night. What are your hopes and dreams? What are you trying to achieve? And then we pull out of this, anywhere from 3 to 5 guiding principles. One of the things that I've noticed over the last couple of years is that there's a menu of about 15 of these, right? Every organization is going to draw, for the most part, from this menu of 15, give or take. The most creative one that I recall was I worked with a big law firm, and one of their guiding principles was we must keep our partners out of jail. I thought that was a creative way of talking about risk reduction. But I think that really starts to get to the why are we doing this? And I'm curious, what do you guys see out there as some of the greatest hits of the why right now? And keeping partners out of jail does not count. That one's already been taken. So so over to someone else.
Let me clarify that question. The greatest hits of good ideas or poor ideas or both?
Actually, I would love to know. Give us 2 good and 1 that's gonna make us hold our face in terror.
When I started this is the kind of the hold your hands in terror and cringeworthy moment. I got into a habit of asking these questions. Working with Microsoft and sitting in a Microsoft MTC with a client that was invited in, and I was the guest cloud, I don't know, strategist in the room, and clients coming in to learn about how to move forward with their cloud initiative. And typically, I like to take a step back and ask these questions about, why are you doing this? What's the point of this? Why? And one time I asked that a few years back, and the person that the client was sitting across the conference table and paused for a long time and dropped his head, and there was like a long uncomfortable moment, and he eventually raised his head again and he goes, we're just doing it because I was told to do it by our C-suite. We have no idea why we're doing and I quickly had to kind of pivot to I guess kind of move on from, let's say, the embarrassment of him I think feeling that he had to admit this, to look, that's good. Like, it's okay that you don't have this clearly defined and that you're moving forward with this because you were told to just go do it and do cloud. I said, because at least now we can, knowing that, we can shape up what that should be. And let's start talking about the benefits and the outcomes that we can achieve. And is it innovation? Is it agility? Doing things more quickly, competing in a competitive market, or is it secure? A client just recently had been hacked. recently, and really that was a key motivator to not let that happen to the organization again. Cost reduction used to be one, but as we've seen, this rush to cloud or rush to doing cloud and not understanding that the users of cloud, the folks building and building solutions, leveraging the services, have an impact on the cost. And there's no cloud FinOps strategy that anybody had considered because that's not in your traditional IT org. Yeah, cost savings is a bit challenging if nobody has considered that either.
Well, with that, we will wrap up this episode. James, it's been a pleasure to have you on it and get your insight. We look forward to getting you back on the next episode.
Great. Thank you all. Great to chat with you today.